I'm Jackie, and it's time for our July reading plans. So these plans are not set in stone. Already, these books are getting ready to fall. And this is probably overly ambitious TBR, as always, with me. I always say that I'm going to pick my TBR the night before or that day of the first of the month. But I seem to fail at that. So is Jane Austen July as well. This is a readathon that's been going on for quite a while and was created originally by Katie from Books and Things, Kate Howe, Spinster's Library, who her real name escapes me, and then I believe there's another person involved as well. This is a readathon where it's all about Jane Austen and reading books related, that are reading her novels and reading books that are inspired by her novels. So let me put this down. Okay. I don't want this to fall. Okay. So first, let's talk about my Jane Austen works. Okay, so the first challenge the one challenge you definitely have to do to participate in this is read one of Jane Austen's 6 main novels. So I have been meaning to reread Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. So I've reread Emma 3 times now, I believe, and I've reread Pride and Prejudice twice, and surprisingly, even though, in the beginning it was my least favorite, I've read Persuasion multiple times, surprisingly, and now actually Northanger Abbey is my least favorite, and Persuasion has kind of grown on me a little bit. I think with Northanger Abbey, I feel like it was too short, and I wish she had done more with that story, but I remember really liking this one. I really loved Fanny as a main character. I thought that she was the one that I related to. And I just been meaning to reread it. The romance is not my cup of tea. I don't like Edmund Bertram. But he's what makes Fanny happy. So that's all I care about, is that this beautiful character is happy. And so yeah, this will be the one of her novels that I will be reading. And then we have also one of the challenges also to read one of Jane Austen's contemporaries. And this is a book that I started, I believe, last year or the year before, and I mean to pick it up again. This is Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. I know in the movie Becoming Jane, Jane Austen met Anne Radcliffe and talked to her about her work. And I've been meaning to pick this up. This is basically this young woman who, after her father dies, she ends up living with her aunt, and her aunt ends up falling in love with marrying this count, and her aunt and this count tried to arrange Emily, our main character, arrange her marriage. And she ends up getting trapped in the count's castle. He holds her captive, her and her aunt captive. So far it's really engaging. It's just slow, and I get easily distracted. But I really liked it when I was reading it, and I just need to think for time to pick it up and just really focus on it and read a good chunk. I mean, I'm on 280. And it's good. It's just, it's one of these books where if I stop, and I don't pick it up soon again, then I get sidetracked by all my other books. But anyway, so this is my Jane Austen contemporary, and one of her contemporaries I'm going to read. And then the rest of these are, well, first let's talk about the Jane Austen. This is a non-fiction about Jane Austen. This is one I got last year not last year, the year before, for Christmas. So I've been meaning to pick it up and read. And I think this is basically the author Paula Byrne kind of I don't know if it's a full-on biography, but looks at Jane Austen in her life. I've tried to film this this video three times. The first time I forgot to use the ring light, so I'm not gonna read, and it's evening, so I'm not gonna read the back like I did the first time. But yeah, now I don't think this will make me cry, probably like her life, like Jane Austen, her life and letters, but it will be a very intriguing read, and Katie from Books and Things has recommended this book. And I think Paula Byrne has written other books that are Jane Austen related. But I figured I'd pick this up as my nonfiction read about Jane Austen. Okay, so the next two are retelling. So we have, now this one I'm probably going to save for the end of the month, because I bought book 3, not realizing it was book 3 off of Thrift Books, and I'm trying to resist the urge to buy stuff off of Thrift Books in July. So I'm going to save this for the end of the month so that I can buy the second book in August. But this is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but our main characters are dragon riders. And the stakes are a little bit higher in this one, like fantasy stakes. Not just, the stakes of our characters trying to find, these girls trying to find husbands, find and be taken care of. But there's like world ending kind of stakes in this from reading the description. And it's interesting that this one actually starts with one of, the main character's sister is already dead, and they're gonna avenge her. So, which, I don't know which sister, I don't know, it might, I don't know which sister, I don't know, I'm wondering if it's gonna be, Jane, the character, I wonder if maybe she's gonna be the one that's already gonna be dead. But anyway, this sounded so intriguing when I read the back. And the first time I filmed this reading the back reminded me of how interested I was in this. This, I think, was recommended by... I remember the first time I heard about this book, I think, was from Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts. She was the one who also did it, in one of her videos, she also recommended Tooth and Claw by Jo Walton, which is also a really good one. That's basically... I don't know if it's entirely a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but it's taking maybe it is meant to be, but anyway, it's basically taking the characters from Pride and Prejudice, but they're actual physical dragons, while this one they're dragon riders. But like I said, I think I might save this one for the end of the month. I don't know. But and then the last book I want to read for Jane Austen July is not technically a retelling, but it's about one of the characters from Pride and Prejudice. It's not a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but it does take one of the characters from Pride and Prejudice, and we get her story. And that is Charlotte, who marries Mr. Collins. And her life, and like I said, from what I remember the back said, her and Mr. Collins, we get their life for 7 years of their married life, and we find out that they lost a son, and they are grieving. They are both grieving, and it's Charlotte, and Charlotte gets, when she goes to visit Elizabeth and Darcy, she actually, according to the back, gets a taste of what a passionate love affair could be, because this mysterious musician, Jacob Rosenstein, I'm looking at the back here, shows up in her life. So I'm wondering what's going to happen. Yeah, this one so far is one of the most intriguing ones that, other than fantasy. Okay, so there's that. And I think Katie from Books and Things, the publishing company she used to work for, I think they were the ones that published this. So I think she was kind of involved, or at least, like, she knew about this book and what was going on with it, I think. Okay, so now there's a few books that don't apply to the Jane Austen readathon. So first we have, this is one I started reading last October when we were at Chimney Rock. This is Bag of Bones by Stephen King, and I believe this is a ghost story. So we have our main character, Mike Noonan. His wife died a few years ago, and he's still grieving her loss. And he's also has writer's block, and he's being pressured by his agent to get another book out. And he has finally gotten the courage to go back to visit the lake house that him and his wife dubbed Sarah Laughs. And there he meets a woman and her daughter, this little girl, and he kind of becomes friends with them, and he finds out that they are being kind of, for like, not held hostage in the literal sense, but metaphorically they're being held hostage by, I think, the woman's father-in-law. I'm trying to remember. And Mike kind of gets involved with them and tries to help them. And like I said, I think it's a bit of a ghost story. And it's just, and like I said, I started this. And of course, you know, with Stephen King, you kind of get beginnings where you kind of are eased into the story. You get to know our main character, and his relationship with other people. And so Stephen King's beginnings are kind of slow before they get into the actual horror elements. But in a way, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you really get to know his characters and understand them. And it makes the horror more horrifying because you know the characters and you grow to feel for them and care about them. So I am on chapter 8, and he is at the lake house at the time. And the last thing I remember is he did meet the little girl and her mom. Which I was kind of surprised by the fact that there is a bit of an age gap between Mike and this woman. I was surprised. I did not realize that. But I feel like, you know, that doesn't, you know, I think once you reach your 20s, that's not necessarily, I mean, it can be, and I wouldn't in my personal life go for that, but it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, like I said, that's not necessarily, but yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing to note. But yeah, so I'm gonna pick up that one at some point, and I figure it's a good summer read because it's a lake house. You know, I feel like it could potentially be a good autumnal read if, like, you vacation in some place where there might be a lake house during the autumn time as well. But I figured it's also more of a summer read, so because there's a lot of, I think it takes place in the summertime, so I'm gonna, you know, I want to pick up this up, and some of these books might carry on into August anyway, so there's that. And then we have, so this is a biography that I've been meaning to read. I originally borrowed my brother-in-law's copy of this biography, but sometimes I just wasn't in the mood for it, and there was the sense of pressure that this is my brother-in-law's book, and even if he doesn't, you know, care that I still have it, if I still had it, he wouldn't, you know, be fazed by it, and he doesn't have a desire to read it at the moment. But I finally was like, okay, I don't know when I'm going to get around to this or be motivated to read it, so I'm going to give it back to him for now, and at some point I'd like to buy my own copy. And I finally, a few weeks ago, saw a copy, or should say a couple months ago, saw a paperback copy at the Roast Office, and I was in the vault, and that is the John Adams biography by David McCullough. Now, this is the adaptation time edition, which for me, that doesn't bother me that much. I know for a lot of people, it does bother them whenever they get a on-screen tie-in edition. because a lot of times that's not as pretty or aesthetically pleasing as, a regular cover doesn't have an on-screen image. But and I'm just happy to find a paperback adaptation of this, because I've been wanting to read it, and it would be the cheapest version I could probably find. Because even on thrift books, it might still cost a little bit more than $4. Because this was $4. But yeah, this is like I said, this is about John Adams, and he's a person I've always been intrigued by ever since I saw the 1776. The movie, I have not seen the actual stage show. Actually, no, I have, because my dad, he auditioned for our community theater version of it back in the day. He wanted to actually play John Adams, but apparently he was too tall. Even though Brent Spiner played him in the revival show, and him and Brent Spiner are the same height. But anyway, I think. So I, ever since I've always been intrigued, and I got a little bit about Adams in the Hamilton biography by Ron Chernow. Like, Adams was not the best president. But anyway, I've always been intrigued by him and wanting to read this. It's just, like I said, sometimes I'm still kind of easing my way into nonfiction. But yeah, so there is that. And I don't really want to bring around to watching the miniseries, but because it was taken off of HBO Max. But it might come back. So who knows? Okay, so I got 2 more books, and then I'm gonna show you some books and I'm gonna show you a few more books that I'm currently reading. Okay, and then so this next one is a sci-fi book, and is one of the books I got at the author event, and I met the author, and he was pretty cool. This is The Ultimate Through Hike by Christopher E. Cancilla. So, the way he described it is basically hiking, but the characters are on a different planet. And it just sounded so intriguing, the premise and everything, and how he talked about it. And I just love how passionate he's about, about hiking. And there's even information about hiking in this book. Like, before you get to the story itself, there's a little bit of, like, things that you need to know about hiking, like, in real, but I thought that was really cool, the whole premise sounded really cool, especially, like, he's mixing his favorite hobby, one of his favorite outdoor activities, with one of his favorite genres. And it just seemed like such a cool thing. And I don't want this to be one of those books that sits on my shelf and I keep getting distracted and not get to it. So I want to get to it soon. Sooner rather than later. Now, I've already done 2 of the books that I got from that author event, which is Sophie's Pack and Ash's Acid, which were both really fun. I wish Sophie's Pack was longer and had more stuff in it, like, more information about, characters, other than the main one. And then Ashes was really fun. It reminded me a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But anyway, so yeah, and what's nice about this is big print. I love big print. Okay, so the last book, well, not the last one, because I'm going to show you books I'm currently reading. But we have The Name of All Things by Jenna Lyons. So this is the sequel to Ruin of Kings. So this was Ruin of Kings I read towards the beginning of the year. So I decided, I'm going to read the next books in the series of my big fantasy series in a certain order, if that makes sense. So, read this one next, and then read Words of Radiance, because after this one I finished Way of Kings finally. So after I read Ruin of Kings, so I figured read the sequel after I read this sequel. I hope that makes sense. So this one, we get to see where Kieran goes next, and he's teaming up with this other character. I think this woman who apparently knew him, or she knew him or she's connected to the wizard Relosvar. And I'm thinking it's going to do a similar thing to the first book with how the structure of the story, how it's told, where we go back and forth between, which I liked personally. I thought that was I really liked that. I know that a lot of people that found it very confusing, but I thought that was really cool. A really cool way of telling the story. So there's that one. Now let's talk about some books that I am currently focused on. So, I am currently reading The Weight of Ink by Rachel Caddis. This was one of the books I got from our trip to Chimney Rock when we went to Asheville. And I wish I could remember the name of that other town we went to. But both those places had really nice bookstores. Although the other town had the bookstore was a lot smaller than the one in Asheville. The one in Asheville was a lot bigger, was big. Not huge, but it was pretty good size. Probably the same size as the Books A Million I have close to my house. But this was the one I got at the smaller bookstore. And this, and it's funny, at the time, it was like, was not my first choice of book purchases. Originally, I wanted to get those Paper Mill Classics, but my mom was like, if you're going to get those, you would want to get more than one, and it would be kind of cost a lot. So I ended up I chose this one, which I'm glad I did, because this reminds me a lot of the story, and I'm very much engaged in this story. It's basically this woman, this British woman, she's a college history professor, and she comes across this document. One of her students presents her this document, this old document written by a famous Jewish figure, and but problem is she's not Jewish, and she feels it wouldn't be right for her to look at the document, so she ends up tracking down this American college student who is Jewish to become her assistant, and look at the document with her. And we get that story along with the story connected to the document. And like the story, it does have kind of 3 plot threads, although one of them is kind of more in the background. And we get that whole history, but then, that's it. It's just more explaining why Helen Watt is the way she is in the present. And this one, and then the other two, like I said, the one is the past, and then we have the present day storyline with Helen and Aaron, the student, her assistant. And I really like that dynamic. It's a very intriguing dynamic, although a very frustrating one, because they kind of can, if you think about it, they probably relate to each other, can relate quite a bit, their frustrations, but at the same time, they're not communicating, they're not, trying to understand each other. But yeah, it's really good, and it just, like I said, it reminds me a little bit of the story and how it's written and the kind of story it is. And I love the Deckle. I'm one of those people who actually really enjoys Deckle Edges. I really like that because it feels like an old book. I know that not everybody loves that, but I think I really like it, and I think it fits it makes sense considering that this is kind of about history. Okay, so I'm currently reading that one, and then I finally gave in. I'm finally doing it. My reread of The Count of Monte Cristo. I just loved the book the first time, and what really helped me get through it, because it's such a big book, it's in the 1,000-page mark, is listening to the audiobook. But it's such an engaging story about this. It's a revenge story about this guy who experienced a lot of experiences injustice and is accused of something he didn't do, and his life is ruined. So he decides to pay these people back by ruining their lives, and it's so awesome, and you just want to know what this guy's going to do next. I mean, there are some parts that are tedious, but it's such an engaging story. And I did do a video where I feel like I would love for this to be a TV show, because I know it's been a mini series, and there's the 2011 adaptation that I will stand by and say I enjoyed that movie, even if it wasn't a good adaptation. I still thought it was a pretty good movie, just as a movie, not as an adaptation. But I understand for some people, it's just, it kind of, if it's an adaptation, even if it's objectively speaking, not a bad movie, it can still seem like a bad movie because it's an adaptation of something you love, if that makes any sense. But I think if this was if they decide to adapt this again, it would be a great TV show. Like, I mean, with streaming networks right now, why not? Adapt it again. It's been long enough that they could do it. They could risk it and make it into this amazing TV show, because there's just so much in the story that I would love for writers to explore, so they could actually include everything. Which I haven't seen them in 2011. As I said in the video, is the only one I've seen, so I don't know what the other adaptations have done, because I know there are others, and I would be curious to see those as well. But anyway, this is just so good, and I already started rereading it a couple days ago. So, and I decided it's not the best book to bring with me to work for my 15-minute breaks. So the days I was working, I still brought Weight of Ink. But I couldn't resist. Okay. So the next big accomplishment is I'm finally doing it. I mean, I already started this a while back, earlier this year, but I'm finally reading the Lord of the Rings book. I was very much against it because it was like, I'll just go watch the movie. I don't need to read the book, and the book is slow, and just let me just watch the movie, because the movie, it's so easy to watch a movie, But I decided, I was inspired to read it, to give it another shot and read it, because it's a fantasy book, Yes, it's super detailed, but it's a fantasy book, and I love fantasy. I love the movies. And this is the guy who started it all. I mean, I still don't like people that are gatekeepers about this and, will, crucify you if you don't read Lord of the Rings, and will say you're not a true fantasy fan if you don't read Lord of the Rings, which is crap. And but I want to finally do it because I want to do it, not because I'm trying to please people, but because I want to do it. So yes, and I decided to get this special anniversary, 50th anniversary edition. This has it in the format that Tolkien originally wanted, which I think is why people, those same gatekeepers will get mad at you if you call it a trilogy. I mean, the books were published in separate volumes in separate books, so that's why a lot of people see it as a trilogy. But Tolkien did originally want it to be published in one big book. But at the time, his agent and publishers were like, no one's going to want to read that big of a book. Okay, the only way you're going to get them to read it is if you divide it in separate, smaller books, which is what he did. But now things have changed. I mean, there's still people that probably wouldn't read this, which I think I might switch the bookmarks. Because the bookmark, I'm using one of my Hobbit bookmarks, but I have another Hobbit-related bookmark that's bigger. So I might use that one. I might switch this out and use that one. But anyway, I wish I had a Lord of the Rings bookmark that size, but the size of the one I want to use. But I don't, so maybe one day I'll come across one. But anyway, so I am actually, and it's just interesting to look at the differences already. Because not only is Tolkien very detailed, and a lot slower with the timeline in this. Because, with a movie, you kind of want to pick up the pace. With a book, you can take your sweet time. There's a big time gap between when Gandalf and when Bilbo leaves and gives Frodo the ring to when Gandalf comes back to tell, Frodo, dude, you gotta get out of here. You gotta get rid of that ring. Or at least destroy it. And it's kind of funny, but that it's also interesting that in the movie, it was kind of an accident that Sam, Pippin, and Merry came along. But it is implied, but in the book, they were planning on it to come with Frodo when they realized he was going to be leaving town. So they had definitely planned on coming. So, which is it's kind of interesting looking at the differences between the two. Like, I would love to talk about that, do a video on that. So at the same time, I've been wanting to read Silmarillion, and I did start this. But this is a very dense book, and I gotta, I can't be too distracted. But this is kind of the history of Middle-earth, or the first age of Middle-earth. So it's basically like the Bible for Middle-earth. That's what it feels like. Which I think, Tolkien was Christian, or he was Catholic. I don't remember which. But maybe one of you guys can tell me. I can't remember if he's... But... yeah, I think it's really cool. It's just, like, again, a lot of information. And like I said, it's like reading the Bible. Unless you're used to that, it's a lot. But I think it does help that it's fantasy. And it's kind of basically what George R. R. Martin did with Fire and Blood, where it was kind of like reading a textbook. So, but also really, it was kind of history that you might actually find interesting. So I'm going to read that. And then the last thing is about Numenor. The Fall of Numenor. And this is actually not edited by Christopher Tolkien. This is edited by Brian Silby. So this is... but basically a combination of it's kind of a combination of taking all the books that were written by Tolkien that his son edited and brought back out into the world, taking what was already in those books and turning it and making it into this book. So I think that other book that I've seen, I think, that other, and what is actually really nice is that it's in big print. I love that. I love these books because sometimes the small print is kind of a headache, and annoying to read. But yeah, so I kind of want to check out those and kind of begin my Tolkien project. I kind of started doing it back in earlier this year. And but I haven't picked it up in a while, so, and I just kind of want to read Tolkien and treat it like it's kind of a class. Because I would love to take a class on Tolkien. The same thing with, and be a Tolkien scholar. And also take, there's a lot of authors, they're like Stephen King is another one that I would love to take a class on his works. And study them. Anyway, so there is that. Okay, so that is that. That is where I am in July, where I will be, what I'm planning to do in July. This is not set in stone. And this is probably overly ambitious. And most of the stuff will probably be taken into August. And there are some books in August I want to read. And as well, there's a couple extras that I want to add to this list for August, if this all goes into August. But my main focus will probably be the Jane Austen related stuff. But then I will read the other stuff periodically, as well. But it's just, if I hear about it, then I'm going to want to read it. So that's the problem with BookTubes. I hear about something that I'm excited for, but I'm not sure if I want to read yet. All of a sudden, I'll be like, I want to read this right now. Anyway, so what are your plans for July? Do you have any plans? Is there anything in particular you want to read? Are you participating with Jane Austen July? I would love to know in the comments below. I hope you are enjoying your reading. And please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you want to continue watching more of my videos. And click the bell notification button if you want to be notified when I upload these videos. And I hope you guys are having a great day, evening, afternoon, and I hope you are enjoying your reading. Alright, bye!